The newly built suburban neighborhood gleamed with its modern architecture and meticulously manicured lawns. Each house bore the hallmark of thoughtful design, from the clean lines of the rooftops to the inviting porches adorned with flowers. It was the kind of neighborhood that promised a fresh start, where families could settle into a life of comfort and opportunity. The Santos family had moved into their home only a week ago, eager to finally experience the fruits of years of hard work. Carlos Santos, his wife Elena, and their two children, Mia and Lucas, spent the early days unpacking and introducing themselves to their neighbors. They were met with polite smiles and cordial hellos, but there was a certain coolness in the air from some residents. One person in particular made no effort to hide her disdain, Mrs. Whitaker. A long-time resident of the area, she prided herself on upholding what she deemed the standards of the neighborhood. She eyed the Santos family's comings and goings with thinly veiled suspicion. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The tension came to a head during a weekend neighborhood gathering. The Homeowners Association had organized a barbecue to welcome the new residents, and the Santos family attended with their trademark warmth. Carlos manned the grill alongside other fathers, sharing laughs and tips on how to perfect a steak. Elena brought a traditional Filipino dessert, halo halo, which intrigued many of the neighbors. Mia and Lucas played with the other children, their laughter filling the air. Mrs. Whitaker, however, sat in her corner, observing the Santos family with a pinched expression. Finally, unable to contain her displeasure, she stood and approached the group around the grill. Her voice, loud and condescending, cut through the festive atmosphere. "Excuse me," she began, her tone dripping with judgment, "but I must say I'm quite surprised to see you here. This neighborhood has always been a place for, well, a certain kind of family. I'm not sure how compatible your presence is with the character of the community." The cheerful chatter quieted as all eyes turned toward her. Carlos paused mid-flip of a burger, his face calm but his jaw tightening. Elena stepped forward, her expression dignified but firm. "I'm sorry," Elena said evenly, "but could you clarify what you mean by that?" Mrs. Whitaker scoffed. "Oh, come now. We all know what I mean. This is a prestigious neighborhood. I just worry that some people might not, fit in or uphold the standards we've worked so hard to maintain." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors averted their eyes, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Others stood awkwardly, waiting to see how the Santos family would respond. Carlos exchanged a glance with Elena, his expression one of quiet resolve. Before either could answer, the sound of a car pulling up drew everyone's attention. The Neighborhood Association president, Mr. Hayes, stepped out, a broad smile on his face. He strode over to the group, his demeanor warm and unbothered by the tension in the air. "Carlos, Elena, it's so good to see you again," he said, shaking Carlos's hand enthusiastically. He turned to the crowd. "I wanted to take a moment to officially welcome the Santos family, not just as residents, but as the visionaries behind this entire neighborhood." Mrs. Whitaker's expression froze, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Mr. Hayes continued, gesturing toward the Santos family. "For those of you who don't know, Carlos and Elena are the developers of this community. Every home, every detail, every feature, it's all thanks to their hard work and dedication. This neighborhood exists because of their vision." The crowd erupted into applause. The neighbors who had stood silently moments before now clapped enthusiastically, some even cheering. Carlos gave a modest smile, nodding graciously, while Elena's eyes glistened with a mix of pride and relief. Mia and Lucas beamed, standing taller as their parents were celebrated. Mrs. Whitaker's face turned crimson. She stammered, trying to backpedal. I had no idea. I didn't mean to." Carlos raised a hand gently, stopping her. "It's all right," he said, his voice steady. "I understand that sometimes people make assumptions, but I hope this serves as a reminder that everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from." The words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the crowd. A few neighbors murmured their agreement, nodding thoughtfully. Mrs. Whitaker's shoulders sagged as the weight of her actions settled on her. To lighten the mood, Elena spoke up. "Why don't we all take a tour of our home? We'd love to show everyone the features that inspired the neighborhood's design. The suggestion was met with enthusiasm. Neighbors eagerly followed the Santos family to their house, chatting animatedly. Mrs. Whitaker lingered at the back of the group, clearly humbled but still processing the moment. Inside the Santos home, the neighbors marveled at the thoughtful details. The open concept layout, the sustainable materials, and the nods to Filipino culture woven subtly into the decor. Carlos and Elena shared stories of their journey, from their humble beginnings to the moment they broke ground on the first house in the neighborhood. By the end of the tour, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Neighbors who had been indifferent or hesitant before now approached the Santos family with genuine warmth and curiosity. Mrs. Whitaker, to her credit, approached Elena with an awkward but sincere apology. "I'm so sorry for what I said earlier. I was wrong to judge you. Your family has done something truly remarkable here." Elena accepted the apology with grace. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. We all have room to grow. What matters is that we move forward together." As the gathering wound down, the Santos family stood on their porch, watching as their neighbors dispersed. The air was filled with laughter and new connections. Carlos put an arm around Elena's shoulders, and Mia and Lucas leaned against their parents, their smiles wide. That night, as the lights dimmed across the neighborhood, it felt as though the community had taken its